What's up, friends and family? It's Brian Castrillo, and I just watched The Terminalist episode 6, and this show is just so good. The series is amazing, incredibly written. Of course, this is based on the best-selling book by Jack Carr, and again, his website will be in the link description. Check out his books. He's actually got 5 books, and I'm going to be getting them myself eventually. This episode starts right off from what happened in the past one where he took out Horn in San Francisco, and we got a police chase. It's going like across the mountains and along this mountain road, and eventually the truck crashes into like some trees where Reese gets out. He grabs his bag, but he ends up dropping his medicines that's keeping his headaches away. But he takes some supplies. He ends up getting shot in the shoulder by the U.S. Marshal, Tony Lamb. And then he runs off into the woods, and he eventually finds this ranger station where he gets more supplies. He kind of patches up the best he could with his shoulder where he got shot, and then he's running, trying to get away, and eventually he comes across this bell and has a flashback to his Navy SEAL training. And of course, Navy SEALs in their training, they have this bell there that's basically designed to, if you can't do it, and then you have to go up and ring this bell in front of everybody and basically quit. And the SEALs training is kind of like if you've ever seen G.I. Jane, similar to that. I mean, I've never been in SEAL training, but from what I understand, it's very close to that. I am former Navy, but I did not get the opportunity to do that. But they have this bell there, and that just kind of reminded him. And we see his instructor just talking about his father and how you can't quit on me. Your father wanted, just basically pushing him, getting to that can't quit attitude, which is so ingrained into Navy SEALs. But there's this flashback where he sees the Admiral. Keep in mind, the Admiral is, ultimately the one who put that test medicine on them, which gave a lot of them tumors and got their men killed. But he's in this flashback, and he's basically blaming Reese for his daughter and his wife, and this is clearly going to be fueling his anger, seeing that. Now then we see a conversation with Liz and his brother Ben, and she's talking about how she's worried about him, and she, she's basically losing faith, and Ben just reminds her that who he is, and says, you are also the most optimistic person I know. Start acting like it. But this rain is basically Frogman's luck, and he's going to be able to lose the scent of the dogs, which he did. And then a little bit later, we see that the U.S. Marshal guy, he brings in the Army, and one of the guys actually served with him, a guy named Smitty, who eventually they took him off the case because they didn't want him to not be able to pull the shot. Now, the U.S. Marshal, played by J.D. Pardo, named Tony Lamb, initially, like in the first couple episodes, like where I saw him, he did really well, but he was kind of like an antagonist, and I kind of rooted against him because I love what Chris Pratt's doing with James Reese's character. But in this episode, I really liked his character more, and I thought J.D. Pardo did an amazing job in this episode. Kind of a back and forth with Chris Pratt. This is definitely J.D.'s, and as well as Christina Vidal, who also played a great role. But I just love the back and forth in this episode. And this is really highlighted James Reese's will to survive. But so this U.S. Marshal guy, Tony Lamb, seems to be taking this really personal. Like, this is, he has to do what he's telling Christina, I'm sorry, Mac Wilson is her name, and that he's just going to do this. Like, he just seems very personally driven by this mission that he's on. And then we see that James has a flashback of his daughter playing tag while he's trying to get away in the mountains. When you see this episode, the terrain is rough. Like, there's even part of it that looked like there was brush fire in there, like burnt, and dead trees and rocks, just really rough terrain. But of course, Navy SEALs are used to this type of thing, and James Reese is the best of the best. So now, as this, we see his headaches are starting to get more. We get the flashbacks, and keep in mind, he doesn't have the medicine that he needed throughout this this moment, because he left it back in the truck. And we see the army, which is led by Tony Layham, who told them, because initially the army didn't want to take him, but he said, "I'm going to come with you, but if you feel that I'm slowing you down, I give you my permission to leave me behind," which is ultimately what let him come with them. But so they're chase him there, and then what we find out later is that Mac Wilson, played by Christina Vidal, is coming around another side, and she's also Army, but she's the U.S. Marshal. She's former Army, and she's his partner. Now, this was kind of neat, because while the Army is, Tony Layham's group is closing in on him, and he has him in his sight, and he I think it was Boozer, and he was basically kind of telling him, "You got him in your sight. You got this. Now's the time. Don't wait on this." But he ends up not, and he leaves the bullet behind that was meant for that shot. And the Army basically tells him that he had you in his sights and he could have killed you but didn't. And you, throughout this episode, you see how resourceful Commander Reese is. Like, he uses a cell phone, makes an IED, he's throwing batteries to give away his heat, kind of confuse the helicopters that are looking for heat signals. It just the will to survive in this episode was amazing, and combined with the music, the score for this episode, the tension was super high, and just absolutely loved how this was playing out. Now, we also see he's trying to climb down the side of the mountain. This is how he kind of gets away, but as he's doing it, he's halfway down, and we see his his hands tremors, and this is not a good time for that. He ultimately falls partway down the side of this cliff and lands on this rock. And that scene where he just kind of bends over, like that type of fall would have took out really any normal man. But again, Navy SEALs are the best of the best, and they're trained to deal with pain, so we know we see him limping. He's got the bullet hole in his shoulder, and he's just all around banged up. And he's using a flash to basically cauterize his wound. He heats up his knife, and he heals that up to help stop the bleeding. But during this, he has another flashback, and this is when he's basically waking up, and he hears his wife singing, who she has a beautiful voice, but she's singing to their daughter Lucy when she was a baby, and he hears it through the baby monitor, and just a kind of a really cute moment. And this is where you're really starting to feel the emotional moments of this episode, and you're really feeling bad for James as he's going through this. Then after that, he ends up he's like talking into the baby monitor, but he accidentally talks into the walkie in real life, and of course Tony Layham hears that, and then they have this emotional conversation where he basically says, I'm not going to be done with this until the people who took out my family are underground. And you just this where he's talking about his family and what happened to him, and he did try and get out like who he was going after, but of course Reese did not give that information up. But just an emotional conversation. And then they had this military drone named Loki, and of course, if you're a Marvel fan like me, you immediately know who that brought me to. So I don't know why it's called Loki. So if that's just a thing of the episode, or if that's really real, what they call him Loki, I'd like, for those of you that may know about this, I'd love to learn more about this. But I just thought that was kind of cool. He had this military drone, which he sees him over the top of the ridge, and of course Reese shoots it, uses the rest of his bullets and drops his gun. But now they know where he is, and they're really close, and the music, the tension's getting really thick. They're coming over the side. He realizes that while limping that he's running out of time, so he takes what looks like C4, and he has this this kind of trap, puts it underneath, and then here comes Mac Wilson, of course, played by Christina Vidal, and she doesn't look like she wants to kill him, because remember, she didn't like Horn. I feel like she is better than Tony at really realizing, or at least understanding the psyche of the person that she's talking to. And here she comes around the corner. She's got the gun on. She's like, I don't want to kill you. Where the other side, they probably did. It seemed like they did want to, kill him and take him out. But he was like saying, what this is, and I'll do it. And then they come over the side. It's this kind of a standoff, and he ends up, letting that bomb go, and it of course creates an avalanche which covers everybody. And eventually you see, him sliding down the side of the hill, and he gets covered, and everybody. And then as it's almost like a scene from, The Walking Dead. It reminds me when Beta, he's coming out of the dirt there, because you see Reese's hand kind of come up, and he pulls himself out, and then he sees another hand, which is Mac Wilson's hand, and it looked like she was dead when because he was going to leave, but he saw her, and of course, as any military man will tell you, or a woman who has served, you don't leave your own behind. They are your brother, your sister. That you don't leave them behind no matter what. And so he goes back and he saves her, gives her CPR, and then he takes off right as they come around, but he's already gone. They notice that there's a river there, and of course they realize they lost him at this point. Then you see the scene where there was also a flashback to where the bird hit that window, one of the previous scenes, and it's really kind of sad moment where it like he's watching himself and his family come up to the window where the bird was, and it looks like his daughter recognizes him in his flashback. That was just, again, driving the emotion throughout this. And then eventually you see Liz, his Reese's partner, and she hears over a radio that Reese is presumed dead, and she's starting to break down, because she remember what I was saying in the beginning, she was she was very pessimistic. He's not going to survive this, but just at that moment, here he comes around the corner, and she lights up. She's still crying, and they hug and whatnot, and they eventually get on this plane, and she flies him out. She's fixing him up, and they fly over a drop point where he lands. A really cool scene, because you see Ben just sitting there, of course played by Taylor Kitsch, as he's coming up through the waters like a frogman, and that's kind of how we ended it. But I love this episode. This was a lot of action, and you see his how resourceful and his will to survive this rugged terrain, and just an amazing a lot of action, and this is really driving you know, who he is and why he's doing this, how important his family, and Liz kind of tells him right before he jumps out of the plane that, no matter even after you kill all these people, and you probably will, they're still going to be gone. And maybe what's going on in your head is not just the tumor, but you're dealing with the loss. And I think him and Liz had a moment. But yeah, love this episode. It was a lot of fun, really cool. Got to see a lot of tactical stuff. Just this series is so good. If you have not, I hope you guys are watching this with me. But yeah, love this episode. Tell me in the comments what you thought about it. Or did you enjoy this episode like I did? And I'm gonna catch you in episode 7. We got 2 more left. Love you guys.